The Lover's card is one of the cards that has changed, in my opinion, the most over the years. We're going to start with the Marseille, preceding the Golden Dawn. Now, quick sidebar. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn is credited with infusing the tarot with all of its zodiacal, Hebrew, and Kabbalistic attributes. It happened and evolved through history, but the Golden Dawn are the ones that solidified it into a system. The Marseille Tarot is a French system, and while English decks have translated the card to be the plural, the lovers, in French, l'amoureux translates to a single, the lover. I find this card to be very dynamic and interesting because it lends itself to many different interpretations. At face value, we see a male in between a young woman and an older woman. And possible face value interpretations are a man is choosing between his new wife and his mother. We've all kind of have that mama's boy kind of complex, or if you're identify as a female, you can also do like daddy's girl kind of thing. It could also be a man is choosing between his wife and her mother, or a man is choosing between just two different women who just happen to maybe have not even a age gap really. But these interpretations fit well with the lover's title, as he is between a relationship decision. And also we do have at least a Cupid looking being flying around on top in the Marseille card. Cupid is also a known trickster. He could be there just to kind of cause havoc between different relationships, or this love triangle maybe. However, the keywords decision and choices are more accurate, I find. The center figure has to choose a path, and regardless of gender or relationships, we as humans have to make a decision, or many decisions throughout life. Now, those were at face value. Now, a more esoteric interpretation of the lover card could be that a man is choosing, or a human, a being, a person is choosing between youth, represented by the younger woman, and maturity, adulthood, represented by the older woman. Does he have maybe a Peter Pan complex? Or is he really ready to face the responsibilities of adulthood? Let's go a little deeper. The young woman is wearing a golden crown. Now, in the version pictured, I have the CBD Tarot de Marseille by Dr. Yoav Bendov. So her golden crown in this image is hidden within her blonde hair. In my opinion, it gives a nod to the secrets that the uninitiated of the tarot may not have been meant to recognize. Your version may look a little bit different. Now, the older woman is wearing a crown of vine leaves. The women here represent the twofold soul of humankind, spiritual and animal. This card represents the man's parting of the ways, where he must choose between what is temporary, what is animal, what is physical, and what is eternal, spiritual, the passage and changes of time, life, and journey. The two women here also represent his angel self, and the other his demon self. You ever heard of that indigenous fable of the two wolves that live inside us? One light, one shadow. And whichever one wins over our minds and destiny is the ones that we feed. Well, the Lover's card is an interpretation of that fable, or at least the archetype that fable brings to us. Which one do we choose? The spiritual or the material, or the animal? The lover, the male center figure, is in love with youth and pleasure. Perhaps it'd be hedonistic in this sense, and he must choose to let temporary pleasures go for the perhaps uncertain maturity of the future. Now, flying above in the card, while it looks a lot like Cupid choosing on which lady to strike his arrow, notice that he is surrounded by this light, a star. He's not exactly Cupid, but he's a visual representation of the genius of fate, rather a North Star, his fate or destiny. Notice that in the picture version, the arrow is pointing more towards the young woman. It can symbolize that his path could end in destruction if he so chooses the animal simple pleasures of earthly pleasures. Although he has what we all have, free will. And the price of free will is responsibility, maturity, and discipline. It is up to him or up to the person, to whoever you're reading for, if it is yourself, to choose between the two. Now, let's leave the Marseille style and move forward in history and look at the Golden Dawn Tarot, which looks wildly different from the Marseille. Actually, the decks we're going to look at today all look very different from each other, so you're probably going to hear me say that a few more times. In the Golden Dawn, we're looking at the Greek myth of Perseus and Andromeda. The legend starts with Andromeda claiming she's more beautiful than the daughter of the sea gods. So Poseidon gets a little mad. He floods the land and sends a monster to inhabit the area where before Andromeda's kingdom used to be. The only way that this monster could be vanquished is if Andromeda is sacrificed to it. So she gets tied to a rock, and Perseus, flying around, sees her and falls in love, which is a classic damsel in distress with a hero that falls in love and wants to save the damsel. Now, Perseus slays the beast, and the two live happily ever after. In this version of the card, Andromeda represents ourselves, our ego, personalities, our persona tied up in this world represented by the rock. The beast in the ocean represents our lower selves, ready to devour, to destroy our own self-destructive tendencies. While Perseus, coming from the sky, represents our higher selves. Coming from above, he breaks the chains from the rock that represents our physical world. And we are now free to live as our higher selves, almost being rescued by that higher self. This myth continues to solidify the keywords, decisions, and choices that we saw in the Marseille version that describe this card. We can choose fear and stay trapped in our own destructive thoughts and patterns, stay stuck in that rock with the monster and let the monster consume us. Or we can pray upon our higher selves and break free, become unchained, and choose to ascend. Now we're going to look at the Rider-Waite-Smith Lover's card. And here we see the familiar scene of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden and the Tree of Life, the Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil, and the Tree of Ascension behind Adam. Edward Waite says that the figures suggest youth, virginity, innocence, love before it was contaminated by gross material desire. In my opinion, this ties a bit with the Marseille version, choosing between the maturity of vulnerability and love versus the temporary desires and pleasures of the material world. Waite goes on to say that a great winged figure with arms extended, pouring down influences, talking about the angel on top of the card. This can suggest openness to outside influences and perhaps help that can come from unexpected sources as well. Now, the two trees behind the figures also tie in with the Marseille and with the Golden Dawn versions. The Tree of Knowledge with the serpent coiled in it represents earthly pleasures, while the Tree of Ascension represents the upwards path of the tree, the ascension path of the tree. Although one could argue that it's actually the other way around. The upwards movement on the Kabbalah Tree of Life is called the serpent path, similar to the Kundalini serpent waking and traveling up the spine. We too can choose to wake up and travel up the Tree of Life, while the downward path on the Tree of Life is called the lightning path. which is the path from unity source down to physical matter. Neither path is meant to be good or bad or the right one. A lot of times in Christian ideology, the serpent is evil, but going upwards towards the tree, towards heaven, should not really be a bad thing, right? I wouldn't think. And the lightning path really coming down is all about manifestation. So there isn't a right or wrong. We all do both. And we all travel up and down the tree, depending on where we are in life, what we're dealing with, and what our decisions are, what decisions we're choosing to make. Now, is your head spinning yet? Moving on to our final card in this Lovers Exploration Deep Dive is in the Thoth deck. In this version, we see more of a wedding scene. Crowley sees this card as the alchemical marriage, meaning solve et coagula, which translates into dissolve and consolidate, coagulate. Crowley also states that the main character in this card is neither the bride or the groom, but the child born from their union, which is symbolized here by the Orphic egg, which further symbolizes that this child is actually not even yet born. It is still in that Orphic egg, germinating, waiting to break free, to be open. He says that the Orphic egg represents the essence of all life that comes under the formula of male and female. One of the hermetic laws of the universe is that everything has gender, but the word gender can be misconstrued, especially nowadays where we have the talk of gender, but it's really more about these polarities and different energies. So while that quote makes it sound like this card would be about the coagulation, the one half of solve et coagula, it's actually the solve, the dissolving part. Coagula is actually represented by temperance/art. The Lovers is Gemini in the zodiac, while Temperance is Sagittarius. The two are zodiacal opposites on the wheel. So it makes sense that the two would actually be two halves of a whole. Temperance is more of the great alchemist, mixing, consolidating, coagulating opposites, while the Lovers are more of a representation of the very opposites. The Lovers being Gemini, the twins, is more about being able to hold opposing thoughts, opposing ideas, rather than the consolidation of opposites. Crowley says about this card that the essence of analysis is the continuous seesaw of contradictory ideas. It's a glyph of duality. The Orphic egg, representing the union of the Lovers, or opposite, is really a nod to Temperance, a nod of what's to come of this union. Now, I won't go through every symbol in the Thoth Lovers, or it's going to be a real long video. We'll do a deep dive of the Thoth symbolism another day. But I do want to point out that Cupid, rather the star of genius, the North Star from the Marseille, makes an appearance in this version, right in the middle top area. The arrow pointing down is said to be sent by the topmost point, meaning Keter, on top of the tree, which is the unity of source, at the top of the Kabbalistic tree of life. As if God above, our higher selves above, are calling our lower attentions and tendencies to look up. So once we see the arrow shoot down, we are kind of startled and we're forced to kind of look up to the heavens. So we may wake up and begin our ascension process. The process of dissolving what no longer serves, making a choice between the animal soul or the spiritual soul. Now, as we've learned, there's many ways to unfold this card. But in my opinion, in all versions of this key, no matter how different the design, the esoteric meaning is the same. Decisions and choices. Solve et coagula, dissolve and coagulate. They all mean the union of opposites, or the separation and the understanding of opposites. We see the Garden of Eden in the RWS version, which the soul was expelled from the Garden of Eden, but to which the soul will also return. Similar to the Thoth version, that while we're seeing on the card the union of the two, it really represents the yin-yang, the opposites or differences in each one soul. Similar to the Golden Dawn version, where the higher self comes to rescue and unite with the lower self, while highlighting its differences in the process, while moving towards union. Which, once again, similar to the Marseille version, that while we may have choices in the physical world, our choices can either lead us to temptation or to salvation. And remember that your guardian angel, your North Star, is always pointing his arrow in the direction of our highest self. So follow that.